Welcome to the Lunch and Learn podcast from the National Fire Chiefs Council Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Project. This is the first series of podcasts, and we urge you to share widely with your friends and colleagues to give greater awareness into equality, diversity and inclusion. These Lunch and Learn sessions have been developed to share knowledge and lived experiences via a Teams meeting discussing topics that affect the fire service across the UK. To mark the Gypsy, Roma and Traveller History Month, Rebecca Street and Lisa Hall from Kent Country Council, along with Jo Harfleet from Kent Fire and Rescue, are speaking how to increase our understanding of these communities. Learning from this session support the fire and rescue services meeting the needs of Gypsy, Roma and Traveller employees and communities.
Hello everybody, it's Jo Harfleet from Kent Fire and Rescue Service. I'm going to pass you over to my colleagues Lisa Hall and Rebecca Street from KCC now.
Good afternoon everyone, hello. Obviously this is a Lunch and Learn and it's all about engaging with the Gypsy and Traveller community, which is what we do. I'm Rebecca Street, I'm a Site and Community Liaison Manager within Kent County Council, and my colleague.
I'm Lisa Hall. Hello everybody. I'm also a Gypsy and Traveller Community Liaison Manager within Kent County Council.
So working with Gypsy and Travellers communities in Kent is one of my areas of work. We also work with the Roma population, but at Kent Fire and Rescue Service we see the Roma population as a separate work stream because the majority of our Roma population live in houses and have never travelled. We also know that certain groups of people are more likely to have a fire, such as those living with dementia, mobility and mental health issues. Other groups, such as Gypsy and Travellers, aren't necessarily showing at being at high risk of fire. But there's a wealth of research that highlights that this community are among the most disadvantaged in our society, face problems accessing services, sometimes due to lack of trust, discrimination, language, literacy barriers, poor health, lower life expectancy, mental health, all of those things which could put them at a higher risk of fire. And contrary to what people may think, Gypsies and Travellers living on local authority sites or privately owned sites, lots of them work, pay taxes and bills like the rest of us. So they pay for the service and therefore they expect and we should be delivering that service.
We have a Gypsy and Traveller service within Kent County Council, and I'm sure you have obviously your local councils as well, but you may not have a Gypsy and Traveller service within that, but Kent County Council and Kent does. We cover the whole of Kent and our role is to provide a safe environment for our residents to live in. We manage the sites. Obviously we have to provide enforcement as well at times, and we're just trying to promote independence and integration and support Gypsies and Travellers with a wide range of things. So Kent County Council actually own the land that they're on. They do pay to live there. They don't live there for free. So it's almost like a council estate, but it's not, it's a site they live on.
We work with 150 plus residents. So it's very important for us as a service to introduce agencies. For us, it's Kent Fire and Rescue. Within your boroughs and districts, it will be your local services, fire services. We also attend unauthorised encampments that are on KCC-owned land. Unauthorised encampments are otherwise known as roadside pull-ups. So we have to attend these and also advise of fire safety risks within the encampments. We work in collaboration with a lot of local services and agencies, Kent Fire and Rescue, the police, also the boroughs and the local districts that they are in. And within our role, we also gather intelligence.
Yeah, just to add on to that one, obviously within your areas you will have different teams, so you may not have it, like I said earlier, you might not have a Gypsy and Traveller service. You might have workers within the housing team, so it could be a housing officer that works on your Gypsy and Traveller sites if you don't have a Gypsy and Traveller service. It could be that it's an enforcement person within the council or the waste team. So you do need to sort of speak to your local borough to ask, how do they visit their sites, how do they manage their council sites, because they may not have a Gypsy and Traveller service like we do. So just bear that in mind, every district is different.
So as I said earlier, for us it's about ensuring equality of access for everybody in our community and reaching out to communities who might not be familiar with the services we provide. So the work we've been doing with KCC has been invaluable to getting us to reach a hard to reach community we wouldn't normally be able to get to. But we're also looking at ensuring that we sort of tie this all up with our crews so that they come along to the visits and see where other risks are, where the water is, the best way to get on and off the site, because often the only time they go to our Gypsy and Traveller sites in the past is if they're called to, say, rubbish burning. And sometimes they might have been met with hostility problems, and trying to make sure that if it's business as usual, they go there on a regular basis, it won't be such a problem for them.
So where do Gypsy and Travellers come from and who are they? Gypsy and Travellers compass from quite different groups. We have the Romany Gypsies all the way to the Irish Travellers. They're very different and they're well-established cultures, and the communities can be very hard to engage and hard to reach. They come across privately. That's because they are very private people. They also have rather a big issue with uniform. So any agencies and services that, for example, the police and Kent Fire and Rescue, that have a definition of a uniform, and also our community wardens within our council, they have to wear uniform. Obviously, myself and my colleagues, we don't wear a uniform, so someone in a uniform role comes across as though they have power, and that also can be quite fearful for the travelling community.
Okay, so the history of Gypsy and Travellers, I'm not going to go massively into detail, but it is quite interesting. A lot of people don't actually realise why they're called gypsies and things like that. So originally, you've got Roma gypsies, you've got Romany gypsies, and you've got Irish gypsies. So Roma are more your Slovak sort of group of community. So we have in Kent, we have quite a massive population of Slovakians here, and they're sort of more your Roma gypsies. They tend to have the darker skin, darker hair, and they do share a lot of traditions, but they are very different, and they're a completely separate identity to Romany gypsies and to Irish travellers. So originally, gypsies originated from Punjab in northern India, and they were actually called gypsies because all the Europeans thought that they actually came from Egypt, because they all have a darker complexion, so their skin and their hair is darker. So that's where the word gypsies come from. So then back in the day, they sort of all travelled around, and they eventually came to Europe, travelled around Europe, and obviously some settled here. They tend to, back in the day, work more as sort of cobblers, horse dealers, tool makers, blacksmiths, circuses, things like that. That's particularly the Romany gypsies and the Roma. Nowadays, it's not so much. We do more nowadays is more horse dealers, landscaping. That's more Irish, I suppose, paving and things like that. Then we've got the Irish gypsies, which they originate from Ireland, obviously. And again, they have a very separate identity and heritage. It's really important to make note that gypsies and Irish travellers are very different groups of people. They don't always necessarily get along, just because they have got that overarching umbrella of being gypsies. They don't always get on. We tend to have Irish travellers and gypsies. So gypsies like to be known as gypsies, and Irish like to be known as travellers, not the other way round. They get quite offended if you were to call an Irish traveller a gypsy, and if you were to call a gypsy a traveller. But again, they're very separate. They don't tend to mix with each other. More nowadays, it's becoming more common that they do marry into each other. There is gypsies marrying into Irish travellers and vice versa, and also into our community, which we're known as sort of country people. Or they do have a word called a gorger, which gorger is not probably a very nice word for us. It's not horrible, but it's just not the right language. But they will call you a gorger. It doesn't always mean they're trying to be rude to you. It's just their language for us. But I'd say a more polite word and a nicer word is that we're country people. So just really important to remember out of all of that is that Irish travellers and Romany gypsies are very different. They have very different cultures, very different traits, which we will go on to in a little bit.
We also have the New Age. So we have another category of gypsy and travellers, which is known as the New Age, so showmen. They're your traditional, back in the day, circus goers. They're very much more hippie and free will and free living than the settled community. Whether they're settled in a house or settled on a site, they're very much the the travellers, so the new age travellers, they will commonly just go around life and pull on to a lovely piece of green. However, they're the cleanest, tidiest of the travellers, so there's not really ever any problems with the new age. We have a few new age that travel through Kent every now and then. They come to do the showman and then they're gone while the season's over.
I think it's really important to remember for you guys, who your teams that are going out onto sites and things, you will come across new age travellers, and you might on unauthorised encampments as well. It's important to understand that their views, they do have quite strong views. So I think obviously quite popular at the moment is the vaccine. A lot of new age travellers and probably quite a large amount in the community are very much don't believe in it, very frightful of it, very believe that it's going to, I don't know, give us extra arms and legs, or, that's obviously overreacting slightly, but they are very fearful of it. And new age travellers don't believe in medicine and things like that. That's not, it's all a big thing. So just bear that in mind, that when you are going onto site, obviously you're having conversations, you're trying to get in. Just bear in mind the sort of conversations you're having, particularly with the travellers in respect to things like vaccines or religion. Again, not that you would go on, but you might say something that just off the cuff, that to them maybe offend them quite a lot. You do, Irish tend to be Catholic, so there again is another quite a strong, their religion is a big thing to them. So yeah, thinking when you're going onto sites, think about the conversations you're having. Try not to go into talk about things too much that are quite political at the moment. I think we will go on in a minute to about things that you do and don't speak about, but yeah, that's just something to bear in mind. Okay, so we've got a fact here. Did you know, this is probably a bit out of date now, but it's reported that there are around 300,000 travellers in the UK, and they are one of the most disadvantaged groups. The real population is probably much larger, but some members do not participate in the census. So as we said, they are very private people. The men tend to go unregistered and unnoticed on sites for many reasons. They tend to not do the census because, again, they're very, very private, but also worried, probably because of things like benefits and things like that. So it's about educating them. And that's, again, why we're doing this today. It's about educating them and making them understand. So we've just done the census, obviously we all have, and we got a better response this time around because we were able to explain to them what we were doing. But yeah, they are one of the most disadvantaged groups for many reasons, which we will go on to. But yeah, there's a lot more travellers and gypsies than what we're aware of.
So where do gypsy and travellers live? Although gypsy and travellers are seen as identifying as travelling, they're not always travelling around all the time. So they move around regularly. However, they like to also be settled. So some live permanently in caravans or in their mobile homes, which are provided by the council, or privately rented homes. We obviously deal with a lot of the settled community. Within our plot tenancy, we also have to allow for travelling. So they have a tenancy agreement with us, but within that there is a 3-month period that they're allowed to be vacant from their plot. This is to allow them to keep their travelling status. Obviously the government at the moment, there was a big uproar a couple of years ago, which is still ongoing, that they're trying to shut down on the status of travelling to prevent travellers from travelling, which then loses their travelling status. So we make sure that that's still something that's included in their policy. They like to settle during the winter. They like to travel around during the school terms and summer. So for us, it's really important to get Kent Fire and Rescue onto our sites at all times of the year. It's very good during the summer when the kids are there. There's lots of engagement with the children, but it's also important during the winter because that's our biggest time when we have our families. And you'll probably find that amongst your boroughs and your districts that there will be a larger community during the summer times of the month.
Just a point on that as well is that obviously they do live in tourers, caravans. We do have a big settled community that are within bricks and mortar and houses. Again, more and more nowadays they're sort of being forced to go into housing because of there's not enough land around or spaces on sites. It's not their preferred way of living. They don't like it at all. Again, some will marry into our community, so again they'll be into housing. Also, to bear in mind for yourselves, when the in regards to living. So a lot of the families will live within trailers, and when the boys tend to get to around the age of an early teenager, they will move into a separate caravan. So you've got to bear in mind that you could have a young 13-year-old on his own in his own Torah. It will be next door to the family, but yeah, he will be on his own. So again, he's got access to, I presume, the cooking facilities in there, whether he wouldn't use them. But again, it's something to bear in mind that if you see an additional caravan on a site, it might not just be for storage. It could be that there's one of the younger boys living in there. So that's something to bear in mind when you're visiting on sites. Okay, so values and culture of this community. You probably know they have massive family, they have a lot of extended family, and family is very important to them. It's always been their way of life, and they're very strict. They have lots of big celebrations like family anniversaries, births, weddings, funerals, and that is usually marked by everybody attending. As you might know, in your communities, you'll see there's lots of them that turn up. They've got quite strong religions in the Gypsy community as well, not just in the Irish travellers. They generally marry very young. They have utmost respect for the older generation. So you might hear that, when you attend a site, because you've been called, that you should go to the matriarch of the site. That tends to not be so much nowadays because there's so many different variety of families and people living on the site. But I would suggest that if you did go to a site, generally if there's a guy around and an older person, then approach them first. Try not to approach the female first. Not that that's not allowed. It's just out of respect that you'd normally speak to one of the older guys first. But in an emergency, you'd speak to whoever, to be fair. Again, they're actually known to be very clean and very tidy people. A lot of people think that gypsies are dirty and they're this and they're that. And of course there's a handful of that, like there is in our community, but they are actually overly clean and tidy. Actually, the Irish travellers, you'll see. Many of the Irish travellers are practicing Catholics, and they have very different religions and customs and heritage. I think in a roundabout way, for values and culture, there's a lot of do's and don'ts. They are, like I say, always tend to go to a sort of an older person on site. When it comes to the boys are very much men, quite young. They go to work, they're off and doing things. The girls some will stay at home and do sort of cooking and cleaning and looking after the littler ones.
So Gypsy and traveller traditions. No, so education. Being on the road means that the traveller children often grow up outside of education systems. A lot of people actually think that they don't always attend school. However, the majority of the children do attend primary. Traveller girls are often taken out of education just before secondary school. One of the reasons for this is to prevent them from mixing with boys from other cultures. Another reason is for them to become the woman of the household as well as the man of the household. So there's a difference between, again, this is difference between the Gypsy and the Irish traveller. So the Irish traveller girls tend to come out of education just before secondary to learn how to cook and clean, whereas more traditionally now, Gypsy girls are going on to secondary education and college and furthermore A-levels and university. Occupations. Many travellers are breeders of dogs. There is a long-standing interest in horse trading. There is also recycling and scrap. We have a lot of scrap metal, which can sometimes cause a problem on our sites with fire. They like to set fire to things and then go back to these items to retrieve the metal, whether that being tyres, copper piping, copper wiring, and unfortunately also boiler systems. And unfortunately for us, it's about educating them that the things that they are setting fire to and burning are toxic. So we were having a discussion earlier this week, and we said that it would be really important to educate them that the fumes from their burnings are having an effect on the younger of the family or the elders of the family, so that we could really get a response from them to prevent them from burning these sorts of things. Another tradition within the community is grabbing. Until they are engaged, some teenager traveller girls are subject to grabbing. This is where a boy grabs a girl that they want to kiss. This is the tradition within the Irish community. We see a lot of this going on in our local supermarkets, shopping centres, the likes of Blue Water. The girl will parade, so she will get in her best clothes, her best heels, and she will parade around Blue Water until she is picked by a guy who will then approach the boy of her family, whether that's her uncle or her brother, or it could even be a younger sibling. It doesn't have to be an elder to this girl, and will ask for her hand in marriage or a date, or so that's the kind of thing that they get up to when they parade.
Okay, so law and privacy. Law is a very good one, but privacy, okay, so they are very private about their life. They are not a lot is known about the Gypsy law. That's right. There is a law between them, which we don't really know about, but they all know about. And it protects travellers from external and internal threats, but also serves as a code that organises their society. I presume, probably, from my point of view, their law would be, the elder would deal with anything. If there's a threat, then everyone needs to be here. Doesn't matter where you come from, family-wise or friends. If there's a problem, then you're all coming down here and you're all going to help sort it out. Again, with their law, if someone passes away, it would be, say, I don't know, let's say, for instance, using me as an example, and my sister passed away. Obviously, I'd go to the funeral, all my immediate family would, but anyone else that was a Gypsy that knew of my family, even if they'd never met me, but they knew of my family, it would be that they would need to attend as well. And if they couldn't attend, then a son would attend or the daughter would attend. They might never have met my sister, might never have known her, but she would, they would have to attend. So they would travel down to attend. That's why often you see funerals and there is thousands, because it is their respect is that you go and show respect, whether you knew them or not. You knew of them, or you knew their brother, sister's cousin. So yeah, again, that's probably within their law. There's lots of different things. Some of the most common traits are that we've got here is cash-centric culture. So they deal with cash a lot. Only nowadays they've started to get more banks, building societies, but again, it's not something they deal with a lot. They distrust of British authorities. They do. It's all down to education. They're not educated enough, and it's just tradition over years and years and years, or bad experiences that they hold on to. They're a very isolated community. They tend to not go and do anything that country people will be doing. They tend to sort of keep themselves away, but that's a fear of sort of, people being prejudiced and things like that. They've got low levels of literacy. Again, that's probably just due to not attending school, but again, a lot of them back in the day were travelling around. So you'll find that if you go to site and you need them to sign something, or you are giving them a leaflet about something, it needs to be simple, because a lot of them can't read. They're very close-knit. They do get married early. They do have large families, and they have a cultural focus on honour and shame. So they are considered to be the most socially excluded community in the UK. They've actually got a lot lower life expectancy than us, and with travelling men and women living 10 to 12 years less, which is huge, isn't it? It's massive. We have higher rates of infant mortality. Again, that's because of probably attending appointments and things like that, but also about the conversations that are had. So, certain things aren't spoke about within the family. It would be that, if there was a pregnant mother, she wouldn't go and talk to her husband about any problems she's having in that pregnancy. She wouldn't discuss any details or intimate details about that pregnancy with any men. That doesn't happen. So again, for you guys going out to site, if you're going to attend site and you want to start a conversation and the lady's pregnant, particularly if you're a man, you don't talk to her about it. It's not something you speak about. She wouldn't want to talk about it. She'd feel very uncomfortable. And if a man came along, he'd find that really quite disrespectful. So tend to not sort of go, particularly with the Irish, massively in the Irish community, but both. So you wouldn't tend to sort of say, oh, you're pregnant, what sort of birth you're having, or us women tend to have those conversations. Women to women, it's not too bad. But again, they don't really know you. It's not something that, we may have that conversation. It's not an issue to us, but them, no, it's very private. So yeah, again, the infant mortality and things like that is a higher risk because of attending appointments and discussing problems and keeping quiet. Stillbirths, what else have we got? They are at the most risk of low entertainment in education, as you know, but I think more and more so that is changing now that we're becoming more modern and people are tending to go to school and have home education and things.
for us, it's been really important to build the links with Kent Fire and Rescue and the work benefits of taking them out onto site when the children are very young, is educating them that it's okay to call the rescue service, it's okay to do these things. And also it's very important for us to have the presence of the crews and the colleagues on site, not just attending to an emergency, but also open days and visits to the site and repetitive visits to the site, not necessarily just because there is a problem, so that the crew in the area can get used to, as Joe mentioned at the beginning, the layout of the site, the people on site. They'll learn who the elders are and who to speak to, but also just it's really important within the community to have consistency. So if we're doing joint partnership working with anyone, whether it is Kent Fire and Rescue, the police, RSPCA, we tend to ask for the same officer who becomes, building that friendship and that trust. It's very important within the community.
Yeah, I'd say as well that, I mean, a really good example of this from our side and our team is that we had a site in one of our areas, and that site's view on the rescue service was very much like, we don't want them here, we'll quite happily pelt rocks at them if they want to come here. And then the view of the actual fire and rescue service was pretty negative of them as well. They were quite happy to flatten the site, to be fair. So there was this real, negative feeling from both. But we knew that with the amount of risks on this site with regards to burning and their understanding of the burning, and I suppose you guys attending as well, it wasn't, they didn't want to attend, they had to, but they didn't want to, they didn't like attending. They were very negative and very like, they're gypsies, they're this, that and the other. And we had the same from the gypsies, but we went and did a community or attended with the crew and offered some advice and some safety and just chatting really and getting to know them. And you know what? It all completely changed. Straight away, I remember one particular officer who came and he was very, hostile, didn't really want to be there. But I tell you what, within sort of 10, 15 minutes, his whole persona changed. And he actually thought, this isn't as bad as it is. And now they've got a good relationship with that site that, if something goes wrong, they're happy to call, but also they're happy to attend. And that's what we need across all our sites.
Often the leaflets we produce have got lots of words and lots of information in for a community that either can't read or have low literacy levels, or some of the risks that we put in them actually aren't relevant. One of the things we were talking about earlier this week was around using candles in trailers, and very few trailers that I've been to, and certainly that the girls have visited, have candles. So why would we include that as a risk? Cooking is another thing that we included as a risk, and keeping pan handles and things away from young children. But we've already heard that young girls learn to cook at a young age. So we're actually telling them a message. They're not going to stop doing it, but we need to think of ways to perhaps present that differently. We as an organisation think we're approachable, and to most people in the community we are, but certainly to this community and some of the other migrant communities, we're not approachable, and we need to work harder to build that relationship with them and to be visible. Lots of these communities say, we don't see you, we only see you once in a blue moon. You come obviously if we're burning rubbish, but actually the experience I've had since going onto these sites is completely different. And I think what I'd say to everybody is check your own biases and your own perceptions, because I'd never been to a Gypsy and Traveller site. I'd read lots of stuff in the media which is generally inaccurate and discriminatory. And I don't think on any of the sites I've ever been to, yes, I've been met with suspicion, but I've never been met with hostility. I've been offered cups of tea, I've been invited to lunch, I've been told come back anytime, love. And generally the people are just like the rest of us. You'd walk past Gypsies and Travellers in the street and you wouldn't even know that they were Gypsy and Travellers. So why do we hold that perception that they're a certain type of people? And that's very much because of what we see in the media. But during our visits, we've probably visited over about 150 of KCC's residents. The vast majority of them have accepted a safe and well visit from us. And they actually like a freebie. Who doesn't like a freebie? It might only be a smoke alarm, but actually they want that. And from the very first visit, the thing that we noticed was other sites were then calling Rebecca and Lisa and saying, when a Kent Fire and Rescue service coming to us? The message is spread really quickly among the community. They listen to each other, they believe each other. They'll do that far more than what they see or read in the media. So if they have a good experience of us on their site, that good experience will pass on to the next site and to the other families. So that's why we need to go in with that open-minded approach and take people as we find them, but treat them with respect. The other thing I've noticed is that Gypsy travellers like to talk. They like to feel like they're being listened to. And again, most of the time, these people will stand and talk to you for ages and share experiences and information. And I found it really interesting to learn, really interesting. The work that we are doing is now being integrated onto our dynamic risk information system. And this will provide key learning such as site contacts, access, water supplies to assist our crews with tactical planning in the event of an incident on site. So you're just looking at some of the things that we've been doing. So all of the sites that KCC own and manage will have visited by July 21. We've only got one site left now to visit that we've never been to. But the idea is that that will then be adopted by our crews and is being adopted by our crews so that it will be business as usual. They will go back on a regular basis and it won't be about us fixing this visit up. In addition, we're starting to work our way through other local authority sites because KCC own a certain number, but other local authorities and boroughs also own theirs, so we need to work with them too. We're looking into doing some research to better understand how to reduce fire risk and how to best reach this community and to work with them, but listening to them as well, because you can't design services for, we call them customers in Kent, but you can't design services for communities without listening to them and using the intelligence that we get from them.
Okay, so these are just a few examples of the people that we sort of do joint working with. I think I've mentioned many of them already, so sorry to be very repetitive. But yeah, Kent Fire and Rescue, Kent Police Support, RSPCA, Health, local parishes, district boroughs. So just a quick overline, RSPCA, we do some joint working with them with regards to animal welfare. Health is a very interesting one for us because, as we've mentioned many times, they're very private. So we do get people out. We get training midwives, Health Watch, and the district and borough councils. We work with the districts and borough councils because we actually manage two of Maidstone Borough Council site on their behalf. So within Maidstone Borough Council, and you might find this within your local areas, they don't have the capacity or the staffing or the knowledge to have someone in that role to particularly manage their two sites. So we have a management agreement. We don't own the site, but we manage. So we do all the maintenance and everything that we've mentioned that we do on our own sites. We do that for them. The only thing that we don't really do is private sites. We've been fortunate enough to visit some in our time, but we don't manage them.
For you guys, just on that one, best way, if you can't find your local Gypsy and Traveller service, or maybe they don't have a good relationship with their sites, you really do need to try and find someone who has a good relationship. So one of these partners there might be someone in Kent Police who actually visits regularly, or a PCSO that goes there quite regularly and has a good relationship. It's a good way in. If you want to go and engage with your sites and you want to go and do some of this great work, then I would highly recommend that you find someone, a partner or an agency or a charity, someone who is working with that community on that particular site that you can go in with. If you can go in with one trusted person, like Joe did with us, then you'll be fine. Not that you wouldn't be fine, but you'll be met well, and they want to listen to you and they want to take on board what you've got to say. And again, with the private sites, obviously we don't do those, and in your areas, the housing officers may have links with the private sites, but again, I would try and find someone, just ask around in the housing team in the council, or somebody, and just say, who does visit these sites, who goes there to check in or carry out enforcement, things like that. Even if they are doing things that are enforcement, sometimes there's still a good relationship there. We carry out enforcement, but we still have a very good relationship. So find out who it is. Do make sure they're a positive person that attends the site that they want to see. Otherwise, that one experience, they will stick with it. Anything you say to gypsies and travellers is almost like a man's handshake. So if you go there and you go with someone who don't really want to be met with, and you attend, they're going to remember that, and it's almost like a handshake in their head. That's it. They're going to remember that forever, and that's why it's so hard to overcome these barriers sometimes. She's on the next slide. The barriers of negative experiences, sadly, or even just another agency that you're attending attending with, they've got a negative experience, it does stay with them. They do find it hard to move on from it. So just remember that one negative experience could make a difference, and again, that one positive experience could make a massive difference. Some of the barriers we do face is obviously uniform. People attending in uniform, they don't like it. It's almost like an authority. I think they feel that you think they're above them. Yeah, again, and it's just tradition over years and years of how people are seen in uniform to them. It's not known to them. They don't wear uniform. They don't tend to go to jobs that need uniform. So again, it's all about that educating approach and relationships. Keep it simple, keep it friendly as you do anyway, and just think about that approach. Think who you're approaching, who you're speaking to, what you're speaking about. How do we overcome them? We overcome them by going in with the people that have that relationship already on those sites, people like Joe, working together and educating them. It's just such a big thing, is educating. If we can educate them, then we can overcome a lot of these things. Then obviously sticking to your promises. If you say you're going to go there, you've been there and you're going to go again next week because, I don't know, someone needs a smoke alarm that you haven't got on board, and you say you're going there next Tuesday, that is what I mean about a handshake. They will take your word for it. If you don't go next Tuesday, unless you let them know that you can't attend, but if you just don't go and don't turn up, that's going to be a negative experience for them. And yeah, it's almost like, well, we're not interested now. So yeah, just try and remember what you say. If you're going to promise something, do it, because they take everything so literal. Like us, we can be a bit more like, oh, okay, it's a promise, but they do really take things very much to the heart. That's what they're doing, so they're going to do it. And again, all of this is about integration. And yeah, I think some of the barriers faced. Okay, so I've got a couple of things that we wrote down actually. And one of the barriers would be that they wouldn't necessarily phone you guys, because they'd say, oh, they're not going to be quick enough because we live in a caravan which is going to burn down within 2 seconds. So we call them. By the time they come to us, because we're travellers, they're not going to come to us quickly. That's what they think. So it's about telling them different. Again, it's about the insurance. They don't have insurance, none of them. It's very hard to get. So they want to firefight themselves. They're going to try and put this fire out themselves. They're not going to call you guys because actually they've got important belongings in there that they need to get to that aren't insured, and you're not going to get there quick enough. That's their fault. Again, the barriers of perception of firefighters. It's about visiting regularly, about speaking to them, educating them. They're not going to come to your community days. It's more like you need to find a service like us that you can get in and take the fire truck down there on the holidays, let the kids see it. All those little things are going to make a huge difference to you attending, and you're going to get a much better welcome. So culturally, something we just haven't mentioned actually, which is really important, is culturally fires. Having a fire it's not really a barrier, but having a fire is a really big thing, a really important thing in their community. So fires are often linked to celebrations and they're used all the time. So usually they sometimes have a fire bin, but they don't. Fires is part of their culture, they would say. It's what they do. It's like horses. That's part of theirs as well. But with regards to fires, it's very different. It's really interesting. So if someone passes away, traditionally the person that passed away, that caravan that they lived in would get put on fire, would get set fire. Nowadays that doesn't happen as much because they are rented and things like that, so they can't. But if it is owned, and if that granddad lived in there, that does get burnt and they set that on fire. So that's something to bear in mind. They also, as soon as that person has passed away, whether it's a male, female, whoever, it's tradition that as soon as they've passed away, a fire gets lit. So they will set up a bonfire, if you want to call it, fire pit, that gets lit, and that will stay light until the day that that person is buried or cremated. And someone will always be sitting around that fire. So that fire is tended to majority of the time. And to be fair, it's not done in a way that it's going to spread or they're putting toxic things on it. It literally is just a fire that they use socially to talk about that person, to share stories. And that happens majority of that community, is that they will have that fire, and it could go on for a good 3 or 4 days where they would sit around it, burn things, have a chat. And yeah, just bear in mind that the fires, when someone passes away, is it's quite a big thing.
And so for us as a fire service, the last thing we want to be doing is turning up and trying to put out this fire and causing a problem. That would be a big
God,
issue.
no.
So
No way.
we need to turn up and understand what's going on, and then back off and leave them to it.
Yeah, making sure it's just controlled. Yeah, if you were to turn up and put that fire out, I mean, obviously, if it's completely out of hand, then have a chat with them, because they will listen, and they might make some adjustments to how they're burning that fire. But yeah, certainly, if you were to put that fire out, wow, that fire's been going for 2 days and you've just put it out and the person's not buried yet, is yeah, it's a huge thing, and you'll tend to find it's only the men that sit round it, and the men will stay round it, and the women will be there making teas and coffees, and the men and the women stay very separate. But yeah, don't be going and putting it out.
I think just on that point as well, I think that goes back to the education of joint partnerships and finding that key person to get into these sites, because when we have a passing of anybody, we obviously are notified, so we're able to then notify all of the services that we work with to prevent those kind of things happening. So Friends, Families and Travellers, otherwise known as FFT, they're a community-based charity. They're based in Brighton, but they cover nationally. They work on behalf of all Gypsy, Travellers and Roma. And there's a GT Voice. This is an organisation that represents Gypsy and Travellers. They act as the voice with regards to any politics or any human rights. And then you have the Traveller Movement, which is based in the UK, which is also very similar. They support the GRT Voice as well. And then we have the National Association of Gypsy and Traveller Officers. This is otherwise known as NAGTO. This is a association where officers like myself and Rebecca would attend, and other officers within any kind of area. You're allowed to become a member. It is a paid service. You have to become a paid member, and they do monthly and quarterly meetings, and these types of presentations and these types of discussions are taking place there. And it's mainly to educate everybody about the Gypsy and Traveller community.
And finally, the point on there was, do we have a fire and rescue service network of staff that are aimed to support Gypsy, Roma or travellers who work in fire and rescue? I'm not aware of one, but somebody in this group might be. And one of the reasons for asking that is there was a report done some while ago by the Equality and Human Rights Commission that said lots of this group of people don't put on forms when they're applying for jobs, that they're from those cultures and those backgrounds, for fear of discrimination and not getting those jobs. But think of the things we could learn if we have got those staff working for us. That would be really useful. The only other thing for me to say was some of the risks that you notice when you're on site are around things like travelling leads and trailers having overextended cables going between different things. Most of the people I've met smoke outside their trailers. I think we're going to need to move to questions in a minute, but we'll do that now, and then at least that way we'll cover anything you've got that you want to answer. So we have, you visit sites. Do you also get notified by KCC of families in bricks and mortar housing in winter months?
No, it's not something that we get notified, and we certainly wouldn't be notifying anyone. They tend to group together, so if they are in bricks and mortar, you'll get the odd travelling family around that's probably married into our community anyway, so everything slightly shifts anyway. But in regards to them being in bricks and mortar, yeah, they're usually grouped together. So where we are, we know the areas where there's lots of settled Gypsy and Travellers. I don't know if that answers your question.
They don't tend to chop and change from our site to a house. So in the past, we've had someone that was living on a site who wanted to get into a house for certain reasoning. They then moved into the house and decided that they couldn't cope with living in bricks and mortar. They wanted to come back to site, and then they became a family back on our site. It's kind of one or the other. You either live on our sites or you live in a house. And then if you live in a house, whether it's a council house, it would be the housing team that would provide the service with relation to fire or any kind of agencies visiting that house.
So one of the other questions was in relation to female firefighters. The person who said they'd had a guy turn his back on them when they visited a small holding. Is that going to be a problem for female firefighters who are perhaps in charge of a crew?
No, not necessarily. I mean, it might be that, again, traditionally, it sort of is a bit of it is both sides really. There is the side that you would speak to the man, but because you're a woman speaking to the man, it could be. Yeah, I'd guess that if you have a male within your team, I would ask them to maybe approach one of the males is better. And if you're a female, then I would suggest that you approach a female or a male. I wouldn't worry too much. Maybe better off approaching the female, because some men will find it that you're a woman, so I'm not really gonna speak with you to initially. So that could be why he turned his back. That's him being respectful, to be fair.
One of the other questions was, what's the benefits of travelling status, when we were talking about people having travelling status and living in their communities as well?
So I mentioned this earlier. At the moment, the government, or it was very much just over a year ago, so things have changed very slightly during the COVID season, let's call it. Prior to COVID, it was passed through government that they would stop the travelling status, which then means that a gypsy and traveller, if they have to be settled and they're not able to travel, it takes away the whole travelling side of being a gypsy and traveller. So unfortunately, they then just become, like you or I, a non-travelling person of society. So that was going through the government. However, during the COVID periods, it's been more accepted that there are roadside pull-ups and there are a community that are actually out there travelling. So I don't know, without knowing the information, and I would not want to provide you with something that's not factual without actually knowing the true facts of it. Right about now, it's kind of just a bit wishy-washy whether they're going to say, no, absolutely not, there's no travelling status, or whether they've actually realised during something like a pandemic that these people who are travelling the roads trying to remain safe, deserve that human right of travelling status. That's why within Kent County Council, within our tenancy agreement, we will not take away the ability for them to hop in their tourer. Majority of our travellers have a static home, which is something that you might see on a caravan park or a countryside park, but they also have a tourer either in storage or on their plot if they have the capacity to have a double plot, which is obviously for two. Then they can jump in that and go on holiday. And that's the most important thing for us when the plot licence was written, to keep that within their community. I could just seen another question come in actually.
Do you have any guidance documents that you can share with us on how to build relationships? Yes, we have. We could certainly put something together, or we have something. I think I've got another type of presentation that talks a bit more about things, and I'll have a look and see what we can do. We'll make note of that, Hamid, and then we'll see what we can get out to you. But honestly, if there's anything that you guys feel you'd like to know more about or want to know, that's it's easy enough for us to put something together. So if you feel you'd benefit from something or you could share with your teams, then please do put that in the questions and we will make note of it. Please all share your email addresses and things. I know that we did speak about possibly having almost like not a liaison
forum
group, but a forum.
Yeah, forum.
So it doesn't have to be something you have to attend all the time or anything, but it's just somewhere you can come and get answers and questions. But I'm more than happy for anyone to drop me an email, whether you're from our area or not, with any questions, or if you're trying to get into a family and you're struggling, then please do.
Right, and just going to say thank you very much to Lisa and Rebecca for joining us today.
Thank you.
Really grateful, and to everybody else on the Lunch and Learn. It's been really good to have you along, and if you've got any questions or you want to talk to any of us, we've put our email in the chat. Just get in touch and we'll work together to provide whatever you need and help you in any way we can. Obviously, from my point of view, I've not got it all right yet. I'm learning on a learning curve, but I'm more than happy to share.
Thank you very much for having us.
All Lunch and Learn sessions are available at www.ukfrs.co.uk.